I mentioned last week that if it hadn't been for the scholarship of the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, we may have never beneficially resolved the Facebook issue. You can't escape the conclusion that so many of these issues are beyond the comprehension of most people in the Parliament who won't do homework and rely on the bureaucracy. I've spoken in detail in the past on this submarine issue. You may remember I spoke to a man called Gary Johnston. Gary Johnston's no dope. He's a very, very successful Sydney businessman and the owner of the website Submarines for Australia. He was a central figure in a report written by the consultancy firm Insight Economics, which found, this is 4 years ago, that the plans for the future 12 submarines were made on the hop by Turnbull and Pyne. The report by Insight Economics highlighted the fact that the acquisition will be the biggest ever defence acquisition project, would cost far more than necessary, and because of its extended delivery schedule, will leave a very serious capability gap of several years when Australia will have no operational submarines at all. What was the response of Christopher Pyne? The analysis, he said, was instigated by, quote, armchair critics living in Sydney with no understanding of the tender process involved, unquote. Well, he's right about that. They're not armchair critics, but they knew the tender process was a farce. There was no proper evaluation. There was no competitive tender process. People who've forgotten more than Pyne and Turnbull know about submarines have argued the whole process was, quote, flawed and resulted in the costliest and most risky acquisition approach possible over an unacceptable time frame. And all that, quote, for political reasons, stated that the submarines must all be built in Adelaide regardless of cost, unquote. There was no competitive process between 2 or 3 contractors. The only public economic analysis commissioned was by the Department of Defence from the US consultancy Naval Group. And it found that building ships in Australia involved a cost premium of up to 30 to 40%. Doesn't common sense tell you if you give one company a monopoly over supplying the nation's naval ships, the competitive impulse to deliver value for money disappears? Remember what I've been saying about the Paris Climate Change Agreement? On the only evaluation of costs that's been done, it'll cost Australia $250 billion a year, all because of carbon dioxide, which is 0.04% of the atmosphere. Follow Paris, $250 billion a year. Well, that economic vandalism is matched on many fronts, but tonight I'm focusing on submarines. Many would say, thankfully, Pyne and Turnbull have left the Parliament, never to be heard from again. But they leave behind an appalling mess, a ludicrous submarine program, $50 billion, B for billion. No. Forget that figure. Most probably nothing like it. Though according to the written document relating to the original tender, it was $25 billion in 2016. Linda Reynolds has been in hospital. She's the Defence Minister. She faces problems in relation to an employee in her office, but she has massive problems on the defence front. I must here congratulate Robert Gottliebsen, an outstanding writer for the Australian newspaper who's done some forensic work on this, but I've been going on about this for years. Put simply, the original proposal did not pass the smell test. And whatever billions you're talking about for the cost of new submarines, it's borrowed money. There's been no public accountability for its cost or its benefit. Some say the cost could be well above $200 billion. This was all done to save 3 Liberal seats in South Australia and save Turnbull's Prime Ministership. Over $60 billion a seat. And by the way, the first of them won't be delivered until around 2040. It's now 2021. A joint statement released at the time said, quote, the submarines will help protect Australia's security and prosperity for decades to come and also deepen the defence relationship between Australia and France, unquote. France? That's another story. They've played us off a break. And because the submarine program won't deliver the submarines until somewhere in the never-never, Turnbull and Pyne are gone, but the utterly flawed deal remains. But here's the rub. These things are nuclear-powered, not diesel. So they'll have to be retrofitted and redesigned with a diesel piston engine. They're Barracuda submarines. No one has ever built one. And no one in the world has converted a nuclear submarine into a diesel submarine. So this design process could take forever. You and I are taxpayers. This is a rort on steroids. And to be truthful, we should be marching in the streets. One person who's done some of the marching for us is the South Australian Senator Rex Patrick. He's been engaged in a 5-year research project to get to the bottom of what really happened in this massive submarine rort. Remember, I've told you on many occasions the Defence Department is the greatest cover-up merchant in political administration? Well, while Rex Patrick has been doing the research to blow this submarine disgrace out of the water, to mix metaphors, the Department of Defence have gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal the truth. Senator Rex Patrick of South Australia joins us. Senator, thank you for your time. Congratulations on the tireless and brilliant work you've done. Just to start, surely this whole contract should be ripped up, shouldn't it?
Good evening, Alan. This is a real problem contract for Australia. It started off back in 2009. We thought it would be something between 10 and $20 billion. We spent about $200 million trying to basically understand the landscape, went to a competitive evaluation process in 2015. Going into that process, we thought that the submarines were going to cost us 50. Coming out of that process, we found that the submarines are going to cost us $89 billion. So having researched the project, we went from $50 billion to $89 billion. Most people don't even understand what a $39 million increase is. That's $39,000 million of increase, and no one seemed to bat an eyelid when it occurred.
Let me just go back. At a Senate References Committee meeting on February 5 this year, you tied two of the senior defence bureaucrats in a knot, the Secretary of the Department of Defence, Moriarty, and this Tony Dalton, who's responsible for Navy shipbuilding. Now, to keep this simple, are you saying that the original French tender, which was successful, bore no relationship to the final document?
There is no relationship between the tender price, and interestingly, I spent most of today fighting the Department of Defence in the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. I've already won access to the information about how much the French offered to build the submarines for, still being denied to me. They're challenging me on that. And but the problem is that we've gone into this program hugely expensive, hugely risky. It's got some very weird characteristics. We're supposed to be trying to find ourselves a regionally superior submarine. We know that when it's delivered in 2035, and that is, as you suggest, a decade and a half away, but probably longer, well beyond the point in which we may well need them, the submarines will have a lead-acid battery. Now, the only other place you're going to find a lead-acid battery in 2035 is in a museum. So performance-wise, it's problematic. It's running late. It's not meeting expectations in terms of Australian industry content. Australians are quite prepared to pay an extra quid to get a submarine that is built here, provided we're transferring technology and we're doing work here and we're creating jobs. But we're not even getting that out of this particular program.
Shouldn't we be acquiring six? Shouldn't we be acquiring 6 off-the-shelf submarines? I mean, the cost of building in Australia, according to defence sources, would be 30% dearer than the cost of buying offshore. But of course, there has been no thorough economic analysis. I mean, you're saying that the whole of life cost, that includes the acquisition, sustaining, and then the life extension, you've got to extend the Collins class to cover the gap, would be over $200 billion, and the possibility the first of these won't be operational 2040.
Well, that's correct. It is an $89 billion acquisition cost, probably $125 billion in through-life costs, plus the additional costs of upgrading the current Collins-class submarines so that they make it through to when these submarines are delivered. It's hugely problematic.
Well, I mean, we had the Collins class problem. I mean, it was built here and then it had to be refurbished and rectified. And in June 2011, it was so bad, this is a Kim Beazley thing, not one Collins class submarine was seaworthy. And now more lipstick in the pig. I mean, we're buying French Barracuda submarines. There isn't one, as I understand it, operational French Barracuda submarine in service. We're ordering 12 of them. And the sea trials and operational work will take years. They're nuclear powered, so they have to be retrofitted and redesigned with a diesel pistol engine. And no one in the history of submarine construction has tried to convert a nuclear submarine to a diesel one. Rex, what is the consequence of a Defence Department failing to obey the terms of the original document?
Well, the problem here is that we may get to a point in 2035, 2040, where the submarine hasn't been delivered and the cost blows out by, let's say, 10% at best. That leaves us with a $10 billion deficit. And that will have to come from other capability, other Navy capability, other Army capability, other Air Force capability that we desperately need. We have taken on significant risk. I'm a former submariner. I served on Oberons. I served on the Collins class. I've been to sea on US Los Angeles class nuclear powered submarines. I've been to sea on the latest South Korean and Greek submarines, off-the-shelf submarines, superb submarines. And as Paul Dibb has
off the shelf,
we could buy 20. We could buy 20 of those submarines off the shelf. We could build them here. That's not an issue. The Greeks, for example, build their German-designed submarines in Greece. The South Koreans have done the same thing. We could get away with a project that got us submarines
off the shelf
by 2028, off the shelf. By 2028, highly capable submarines.
I just want to come back before we go. I just want to come back before we go to this department. I mean, can't you refer the department and those responsible for lying, basically, to a Senate Privileges Committee, and it's got the power to deliver custodial sentences if the Senate has been misled. Now, you have proven the Senate has been misled. What was contained in the original French submarine tender has been changed into the agreement we've now got.
One of the difficulties there is the bar is extremely high. I've been fighting for the last 12 months simply to get access to all of the tender responses, not the actual details of the submarine, but the tender responses that show what each of the companies in our naval shipbuilding program offered to do here with Australian industry, and Defence have been resisting that. And part of the problem is I have one of the documents which I obtained under FOI, is they accepted the tender documents. They chose the submarine on the basis of a very, very extensive Australian industry program, and then they just cast that aside, stabbed industry in the back, and have proceeded down a pathway.
Yeah, they keep claiming claiming it threatens national security, which doesn't threaten them at all. Just let me go back to where we always run out of time, Rex, but we will talk again. I want to end with the question I began at the beginning. Why shouldn't we rip up this contract and buy off the shelf?
At the very least, we need to bring competition back into the program, but the government should be considering walking away from this contract. It's not turned out well for us.
Definitely. Good to talk to you, Rex. We'll keep in touch. I really appreciate your time and thank you for the tremendous work you've done. So that's Senator Rex Patrick from South Australia, who's done a hell of a lot of work on this. So there you are. Paris Agreement, $250 billion. There's another waste of money, but no one worries. No one in the Parliament does any homework except that bloke there. We'll keep at it. It's just an absolute disgrace. Rip up the contract, buy the submarines off the shelf.